Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production here at YouTube, and welcome back to another album of the week. This is episode number 178, and today's episode is me looking and celebrating what pretty much ended up becoming the final Gillan studio album, that is Magic, released back in October of 1982 through, of course, Virgin Records. Now, the reason I just said October instead of September, because of on the Wikipedia page for this album, it lists the release month date as, September. However, because of I own the the album collection from 2015. Was it 2015 or 2016 through Edsel Records? Let me look, since I got the box set right in front of me. Because I got this, December of 2015 I gotten it. It was a Christmas present. Because I spent pretty much the entirety of 2016 basically just listening to pretty much this entire set. Actually, I've never stopped listening to this entire set. Obviously, I mean, it's become one of my favorite box sets of all time. But it's just fantastic. Anyways, I digress. The reason I'm bringing this up is in the booklet that you get inside this great box set, which I don't know if it's still available or not, if it's still cheap. Who knows? It might have went out of print, but still, if you ever gonna find this, it's a great set and a great collector's item, especially for those that are just huge Ian Gillan fans and John McCoy and Bernie Torme or even Yannick Gers and all those guys, and just big Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, for the Born Again album. It's a great set to own. But to continue on, inside the booklet here, since there's a great little, great history write-up on, especially diving into the process for some of these albums and the reactions and what led to the breakup and all of that. It's a really nice read-up. In this booklet here, it actually states that the release month was actually October of 1982 and not September, as you would think, Wikipedia suggests. So therefore, and since this box set was Ian Gillan approved, again, band approved and everything, I'm just gonna believe more of this than Wikipedia. So, this is one of those cases where Wikipedia are wrong, probably because of how many people actually have probably bought this set that at least put that whole entire Wikipedia page together, since that page was probably put together way before this box set was ever released. So, there you go. So I'm pretty much going on a limb that this was released in October, since, again, it is stated inside the booklet for this great little box set. So there we go. And again, since we are in the month of October, this album is already reaching its 40th anniversary. So it's a great time to finally, spotlight this and just celebrate it. And this is it. I've pretty much covered the entire Gillan catalog, because after I release this video, this is it. And I'm probably going to end up making a little playlist of all the Gillan albums that I've reviewed, which is basically going to be the entire discography. So I have gotten to this point. So I almost wish I had a box of tissues right now, because I almost want to cry that I've just covered this entire his solo careers, at least this period, the more hard rock, heavy metal period of Ian Gillan before joining Black Sabbath, and of course then before the resurrection of Deep Purple, which he's just still been with since 1984. So it's just great. So just dive into the final swan song of Gillan. Dive in to magic. So here we go. So I'm going to read a little bit of this booklet since this is a great little, just great thing to read. You know, it's a great source of information, and it's going to be the source for most of the facts that I bring up in this review or this, Album of the Week episode. So here we go. Since I got to basically go from, continue where I left off with the last Gillan-related Album of the Week episode, that being Double Trouble, which this album follows. That was released back in 1981 because Gillan had released not just one album, but two albums in 1981 because Gillan and the band were a recording machine. They always recorded stuff. They always were at the Kingsway Studios, whatever, or Kingsway Recorders, whatever. They just were a recording machine in 1981, and so that's why we got two studio albums that year. Of course, Double Trouble ended up marking the beginning. It marked the debut for former White Spirit guitar player Yannick Gers, and of course, these days is still the current guitar player for Iron Maiden. That marked his debut, and again, it was also the first double album under Gillan because it was a half studio, half live record because of the live portion was mostly recorded at the Reading Festival in 1981, which again also featured bands like, for example, Samson and Rose Tattoo, and had a wild performance and a very infamous performance as well from Rose Tattoo, especially for Angry Anderson. But I digress because I don't want to focus on Angry Anderson and Rose Tattoo or even Bruce Dickinson and Samson. Again, I don't want to lead into that. It's just we'll just focus on Gillan himself and the band. So, obviously, the Double Trouble album, it did fairly well, but according to sources, it wasn't still, the sales for that album was not as great as, let's say, for like Future Shock or Glory Road, but it still did well for Gillan, and so enough to where they continued on to record what would pretty much become the Swan Song, and which, of course, I should also mention that prior to recording the Magic album, since I wish I brought this up earlier, is they had just got done playing the Monsters of Rock Festival in August of 1982, which had bands like Anvil, which had been their only time of playing Donington, which was obviously was a great opportunity for them, but it didn't. Of course, had Status Quo being the main lining band, Hawkwind, Uriah Heep, and did I mention Saxon? Who knows? I might have not mentioned Saxon, but there it was. That was your lineup, of course, Gillan. So there you go. They entered the Kingsway Recorders in sometime in 1982 to record Magic. For this album, especially for these recording sessions, they at least laid down at least 14 songs. So only 9 made it onto the album, whereas 3 of the songs ended up being put onto like either as B-sides or, released as B-sides or even released as part of a split release. Whereas 2 of the tracks, which were covers, were previously unreleased, and I'll get into those maybe after after I just really go through the Magic album. So, without further ado, let's just get into the Magic album. Because again, after obviously going through recording everything, of course it was produced by a guy named Mick Glossop. I don't know if it's not the same guy that did the Double Trouble album. I'm just going to do a little quick search up. Yeah, it's a different guy. They got a guy named Mick Glossop. Let's look up this guy real quick. Apparently he did some stuff. Only one that I really recognize the most is Frank Zappa, and apparently even like John Lee Hooker. But pretty much the one that I see here that is the most recognizable to me is Frank Zappa. So that's really kind of cool. And of course he did something with Van Morrison, who I don't really give a shit about. So let's just move on. So there we go. It gets released through Virgin Records in October of 1982, and with at least 10 tracks, 9 songs actually, but just a little reprise thing at the that is used for filler, basically used for filler. But it actually clocks in at the length of 38 minutes and 45 seconds. But again, this album begins with What's the Matter, Bluesy Blue Sea, Caught in a Trap, Long Gone, Driving Me Wild, Demon Driver, Living a Lie, You're So Right, and of course his cover of Stevie Wonder's Living for the City, and ending with a Demon Driver parentheses reprise. So it's a reprise version of just one of the synth chorus parts from the track Demon Driver, which I'll get into at some point here. But there it is. There's your 10 tracks for this one. Boy. I am definitely one that will honestly say that out of all of these Gillan albums, I haven't heard one bad one. And I don't think, and it's obviously with the limited release, again, from whether it be the what is actually considered the Japanese album from 1978 to, of course, Mr. Universe, which actually ended up becoming the more nationally released Gillan album, debut Gillan album. Then, of course, Glory Road and Future Shock and Double Trouble. And, of course, ending with Magic. There, to me, is not a bad album to be found here. And I would say that pretty much continues with this one. Actually, Magic right here pretty much makes it up there as one of my personal favorite albums from Gillan. I mean, technically, this is the most accessible and most... It really pushes it to being the more commercial sounding album, especially due to Mick Glossop's production, because he definitely gives them more of a cleaner, more richer sound, but it still freaking packs a lot of punch on this album. And the stuff on this one that kind of sounds like it's as you say, maybe poppy, ends up throwing you a curveball and just going in some really odd and just very proggy directions in ways. And especially it all has that Deep Purple ingredient or antidote, it all has those ingredients that made that Mach 2 era Deep Purple stuff so interesting and so different from most things that was coming out in the early 70s. And he continues with that ingredient, that creative style, and even uses to its advantage in some of the more commercial or poppy kind of songs in a way, especially for example, You're So Right, because it just starts off so happy and it's so joyable, whatever. It's so joyous. It's very uplifting the way it just starts off. But as it goes into what would be the middle or chorus part, it just throws you a complete curveball and all of a sudden gets almost very the constructions and the guitar playing, whatever, and the musicianship, or just it just goes into something a little bit heavy, and it's got that sort of proggy little leanings there. Again, it's so unique and different, and that's the one thing that just pops out at me with the Magic album. Is it just goes so fucking insane half the time. It's it just makes me wonder how much drugs these guys were taking, if they were taking any. Were they taking acid? What the fuck were they doing? It just is so unbelievable in some of their song construction ideas, for even the most simplest song ideas, that it just ends up coming up so mesmerizing, and it's just so unique. There just wasn't a whole lot of stuff like this in 1982, especially on the commercial side. It's it should be very poppy. It should be the most easy, most accessible, the most simplistic poppy shit you could expect from the Virgin label. But Ian Gillan and Colin Towns and Yannick Gers, and of course John McCoy and Mick Underwood all these fucking guys in this, again, for this album, for these songs, they just decide to just go straight to the jugular and just don't give a shit whether or not if this ends up being a commercial success or not. It's like they were told that the world is going to end tomorrow and they have to be as quick, as insane as possible. And that's just the overall feel and vibe that I just get when listening to these songs. I mean, again, to just even go further, I mean, listen even to something like Caught in a Trap, the way it begins, and it just has that, it's the atmosphere and the vibe of this song is just so almost kind of dark and a little bit very heavy, and it's so unique, and actually, if that's one thing, this album seems like it shouldn't be very October fitting, but the way it just gets pulled off from this album is so October fitting. Actually, honestly, that's one of the reasons what kind of draws me to stuff like Deep Purple, for example, especially the Perpendicular album, is because there's just some songs on there that actually fits the mood and the theme of the month of October, and you get that on this album for me. I just get a lot of that on here, and especially with songs like Caught in a Trap, which again, it's got that it's such a short, very simplistic structure, but somehow they were just able to pull off a very proggy sort of structuring to this song in general. Because again, it's just a short song, but within each burst, there's just something different going on, and it's just, what the fuck? But yet, it's so unique, and it's so different, and it just draws me straight into it, and I just can't take my ears off of it. I just can't wander off and do something else. It just keeps me glued at all times during this entire album. Nothing loses my attention. And again, it continues even to like driving me wild. So fucking simple again with this beginning. It says do 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 do, and it's like almost would think it should be so your most simplistic hard rock song from this period. And it kind of has that kind of AOR kind of pacing a bit to it, but he just pulls it off in such a unique way that it's just different. You just don't hear a lot of guys that were this creative on this side of spectrum. I mean, Uriah Heep kind of I think this is what Uriah Heep wanted to do in 1982 with the Abominog album. This is what they wished they wanted that album to sound like, because of this just gets pulled off so much far more interesting than that album. It's just they wanted to be this, but they just couldn't reach this point. They couldn't do it. Somehow within, especially with like Mick Box and co, or Ken Hensley, they wanted to go this direction. They probably thought about maybe we should go this direction, but yet when it came time to really writing and constructing their song ideas for the album, all of a sudden it's just they went into blank mode, and they just lost their all train of thought. So it's just something, and I just think that Ian Gillan just he's just so different and so weird or bizarre with his song ideas, but yet it's what makes these songs interesting and different. And that's why this stuff just pops out me a lot more better than most other bands were kind of, especially of the old guard from the early 70s, were kind of doing during this period. Not a whole lot were being this vastly interesting, and I think he just pulled off laws, especially again with some of these songs. But besides that, there are still songs that still come across very straightforward, and The Attack is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty simple to understand. With for example, like Bluesy Blue Sea, it's very direct in its approach. Same thing goes for a little bit like Driving Me Wild, like I just mentioned, and the song Living Alive, which again, it is the album's sole ballad, but he just constructs this ballad in such a far more interesting way, and it just, again, it never loses my attention. For years, I pretty much thought this was the weakest track on the album, but just the other night before recording this, I had listened to this album, and oh my god, I could not lose interest. It didn't make me lose interest at all. I just was so glued to this track that I couldn't stop either, like just in my mind singing along in a way. I just couldn't. It's just it's such a well-written track, and it's just performed great. And I actually think it's again another really good song. Really, I can't really find any bad song on this album in general. I would think like a song like Long Gone would probably also be closest to, because this one is the most commercial sounding track. Actually, funny thing is that this one ends up getting compared to Jump from Van Halen, especially just the way it begins with that's Colin Towns' very simple, very ditty, hippie or happy riff, and it is just a fun. Actually, this has a really funny story because of Ian Gillan, pretty much as for years, pretty much believes that Eddie Van Halen ripped off or copied the main sort of key riff to Long Gone, and he's got again. I'm just to kind of reiterate this story. Was it around this time period? I think it was. This time period. Eddie Van Halen apparently went up to Ian Gillan and pretty much told him that he is this like one of his favorite artists of all time. And it's like, I got every one of your records, and it means including even the stuff he released, as a solo artist. And he was, and again, at the time, he said he was pretty moved and pretty, and was honored that a guy like Eddie Van Halen thought of him as such an icon, and that he pretty much worshiped his whole musical muscle and everything, just his discography. And of course, by the time in 1984, when that came out, when he heard Jump, he pretty much then went to himself, well, shit, he really did. He really fucking owned all of my records or something like that. He really did. Yeah, he copied my riff. And it was hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. But yeah, Long Gone pretty much predates Jump, but yet it's not as synthetic or manufactured as Gillan's Long Gone. It's just very it just comes across more natural and authentic than compared to like Jump. So there you go. But yeah, there's just, again, the more commercially accessible stuff is still pretty enjoyable here. And of course, it's got some heavy bangers on this one. It does, especially like What's the Matter, which is a fiery opener and definitely up there as almost speed metal. And this one, it comes close to capturing the ferociousness of, let's say, the song Unchain Your Brain off of Glory Road, but it just even goes much more further, and it expands on it. And it ends up being one of the most metal songs from Gillan, and it's almost as heavy or as fast as anything Judas Priest. It's just freaking heavy. It's just such a... It is so in line with the new wave of British heavy metal movement, literally it is. And it just is such a fiery opener and just a ball of fun to listen to. It's just freaking great. Then of course, there's Demon Driver, which is probably the album's sole epic on the album, because this one clocks in pretty much a little over 7 minutes long. I mean, the way it begins, it's that very dark, almost atmosphere of Colin Towns' key playing, and the way he just uses it just sets the mood for this one. And as it kind of builds up the crescendo of it, and finally when it gets to the actual track, it just bam right into the freaking nad or the gonads. It just fucking goes right straight to it, and it still kind of has that proggy structuring that you got from classic Purple tracks, especially for an example. Child in Time, off of Deep Purple and Rock. or some of the stuff off of Machine Head or Fireball, like Demon's Eye or something, or just some of those great fucking tracks like The Mule. It kind of goes for that same similar structuring, because again, Ian Gillan, he's got his niche creative ideas. He just has his own style, and he just pretty much continues with that sort of writing direction and constructing direction of the stuff that he did, part of that Mach 2 era of Deep Purple. Again, from those classic 3 records, again, or even, I guess you want to even go further into like Who Do We Think We Are or something like that, from 73 that followed Machine Head. He just continues with that style and writing and song structuring, and it really is continuing here, and he's doing that as well on some of the previous albums, whether it be On the Rocks off of Glory Road or Born to Kill off of Double Trouble. It's that he just has that niche, and he just goes even further. He just continues on with Demon Driver on this album. It just continues that same ideas, and it just continues on. It's again, and just to get a great banger out of it, and I just find a lot of enjoyment in Demon Driver, even though this one kind of comes off a little bit more cheesier because of the themes that it deals with. But because again, it just sounds like almost a very cheesy 80s horror movie or something like that. But it is so fun to listen to, and I just can't help but find a lot of enjoyment in it. And I just think it's a great song off this album, and he just goes straight into it. He just doesn't even look back at all, whether or not if it's or thinks twice whether or not it's going to be cheesy. He just goes for it and doesn't reconsider it, and that's why I end up loving it, and why it just comes across so it's just so natural and so great. Just there's really nothing bad on here. The Stevie Wonder cover might be pushing it a little bit, even though I actually have no problem with the cover itself. Is just that the fact that he had at least 2 other tracks, he probably could have fit in 2 more, and he actually could have taken off this song and could have replaced it with one of the songs that ended up being released as B-sides, or even as part of even a split. He could have, because again, there were 14 songs that were recorded for this album, and he didn't include them onto this album. And again, he chose the cover because again, it became a repeated theme for these albums to include at least one cover, and that really began too with the Future Shock album, and what the song New Orleans a bit, and he kind of wanted to do it again with Magic, and it whether I needed to be on the album is up for debate, but when you got other tracks like Breaking Chains or even Purple Sky, which again are great bangers to begin, especially Purple Sky, which was actually put on a split release, a Virgin Records split release, actually with like Gary Moore and a band called Telephone, which again released the same year through again Virgin Disc. It was actually a flexi disc, and again that's where Purple Sky ended up seeing the light of day, and it probably should have been on the album. Again, I could have replaced the Stevie Wonder cover with Purple Sky, because it's just a great friggin' track. It just has that classic Gillan structuring to it. It's just got that same personality to it. It's just a fast, heavy rocker, again, in this sort of Deep Purple tradition. And it could have been on this album, but instead he chose the Stevie Wonder cover instead of this one. And again, I could have also gone with like Breaking Chains, which was actually, funny enough, was actually used as a B-side to, of course, the single for the Stevie Wonder cover of Living for the City. And again, I could have gone with that one too. It's a great sort of bluesy rocker, but yet it still has the very classic Deep Purple ingredients to this one. And I think it's a really good track. Only one that I think I was fine with getting left off was the song Fiji, which actually ended up being used as a B-side to the track Long Gone. And again, it's a decent little song in itself, a little bit kind of way more balladish than what Living a Lie ended up being, but it still is a fine song to begin with. As far as for the two other songs that were covers that didn't get released until 1989, which again were covers of like Helter Skelter and Smokestack Lightning. Though they could have been fine B-sides, because again, there's a lot of songs on this one that could have been also seen as singles. For example, probably like Bluesy Bluesy, or probably even What's the Matter, or Living a Lie actually could have been a single as well. It could have been, or You're So Right. Any of these songs could have been a single, and their cover of like Helter Skelter and Smokestack Lightning could have been used as B-sides to any of those singles there, any of those songs, you know, but they didn't. And I was probably fine with that. So yeah, it's just a freaking great record from start to finish. I just love every bit of this album. It was a great record from beginning to end. Where do I rank this? It really would be up there as one of my absolute favorites. I would put it somewhere either as my number 2 or my number 3 favorite, because of, I mean, I love some of the other albums, especially like Double Trouble and Future Shock, even like the Japanese album, but this one ends up being very up there. It is very much high on my absolute favorite Gillan album. It's just a great album from beginning to end, and it's just, talk about a swan song. I would say this was a perfect of a swan song than any other band could ever have in their final career outing. So that's just where I'm going to leave it there in terms of my last minute thoughts on the album. I mean, I can point out my favorites would be definitely What's the Matter, Bluesy Bluesy, Caught in a Trap. Demon Driver is a fucking awesome track too. Of course, like I stated, it's definitely up there. So Living a Lie kind of pushes up there too as being a really good track too. So I will definitely say What's the Matter, Bluesy Bluesy, Caught in a Trap, and Demon Driver are my personal favorite songs off of this one. But there's really not a bad song for me on this sound to begin with. It's just such a well-rounded, enjoyable, solid album from Gillan, and what a swan song to this period of Ian Gillan. So let me definitely continue on with the remaining story of Gillan. So to read you a quote from at least Mick Underwood, this is what he had to say at least about Magic. Personally, I like most of the Magic album. We always try to make each album different anyway, and I like them for differing reasons. I still play Living a Lie and Bluesy Bluesy with my band now. Each album was a different beast. My contribution, I always feel, is to make the track work. Play for the song and work closely with the vocals and other instruments. The standard of writing in the band was so high, this was a joy to do. And the production improved with each album. Now here's some little other facts. And again, he had some nice things to say about the album. Actually, apparently most of the band members had at least something nice to say about Magic. Really, I don't think they had anything terrible to really say about any of the albums that they ever worked on. So here are some other facts I can bring up too, is that picture disc editions of both the album and one of the singles didn't inspire the lackluster sales. Likewise, the Autumn Tour with Spider in support was not the sellout in advance as had been. Although there was a lot of positive reaction that included from the band, who strove to complete the tour after the cancellation of a couple of shows after Ian lost his voice. The tour ended on 17th December of 1982 at Wembley, after which the band went their separate ways. The subsequent allegations about the breakup have been widely published, the situation not aided by Ian's throat issues and talks of a Deep Purple reformation that had come to nothing. It's probably fair to say that Ian subsequently replacing Dio and Black Sabbath, parentheses, the romantic drinking story aside, was something that suited both parties financially. When the band went their separate ways, Ian would eventually return to Deep Purple, Bernie recorded both solo and with John McCoy. Jennekers is currently in Iron Maiden. Obviously befriending either like Bruce Dickinson for the original version of Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which was used for, I believe, was the Dream Child movie. Again, Nightmare on Elm Street, the Dream Child. And I believe it was for that soundtrack, if I am correct. I believe it was. So there you go. Moving on, Mick Underwood is currently touring with his own band Glory Road, and Colin has forged a successful career in soundtracks, which again, he's been doing soundtracks even during his time that he was in Gillan. Actually, even before that too, joining Gillan and everything, he was doing a bit of soundtrack stuff. As for the legacy, Gillan's albums are still held in high regard amongst the band and fans alike. In Mick's words, the legacy for being a member of the band for me personally is that it was fantastic playing with such gifted, amazing musicians and taking the music all over the world to audiences that liked it and us very much. I still play tracks from these albums in my current band. Now, this is actually from Bernie Tormé, obviously way before he had passed away. But this was his quote here. It was an incredible experience and education for me. Playing with these great players, I struggled to keep up at the beginning. Doing Colin's songs really kept you on your toes. All sorts of keys and progressions and timings. It was also a huge education for me in terms of people too. Some of that was good, some bad. But mainly I remain eternally grateful for Ian for giving me the chance to be in the band and the chance to make a name for myself. And out of that, have a career and be able to make a living doing what I love. I owe all that to Ian and I am thankful for it. I have played many tracks live since. 5 original high-energy classic rock albums and a combination of musicians together that came together because a special kind of magic. And final word from Bernie Tormé. For the record, I would still love to do 1 or 2 or even 3 Reformation gigs for the fans. I feel we owe it to them. Actually, that's kind of a powerful ending there. That's a powerful ending line for Bernie Tormé because of that never came to be, and obviously now, with the fact that Bernie Tormé has since passed away, you'll never get any sort of reunion gigs with the original Gillan band, at least of Bernie Tormé, Colin Towns, Mick Underwood, and of course Ian Gillan too. I mean, it was his name and his band, and of course John McCoy. You'll never get that original lineup, and it's just sad. Unless your only chance of now of a reunion gig of the Gillan band would be as if Jennekers took time actually be a part of that and pay tribute and respect to all the eras of Gillan in a way, you know. That would be your only chance right now would be with that lineup, but not one with Bernie Tormé, which is such a sad outing. And I should definitely mention that prior to Ian Gillan joining Black Sabbath, the band were still on the fence of whether or not they knew the band had been broken up. They really... I forgot to even mention this because I thought it was going to be mentioned in the book because it's been a while since I read the booklet. But the reason for how the band knew that the band had been broken up was from a magazine article where it actually published the first photo of Ian Gillan with Black Sabbath, or just bringing up the news that Ian Gillan has joined Black Sabbath. And this was just after the fact that he had to cancel tours because of the fact that he had lost his voice. And so it just was shocking to them, and it pretty much signaled the end. They just knew, well, this was it. This is the end of Gillan. Because Ian Gillan didn't tell them, and apparently one of the main reasons for why even like Bernie Tormé and some were questioning Ian Gillan's business tactics, especially when it comes to the pay side of things, they were noticing that the pay was not as big as they were promised. And they were just kind of wondering where is some of this other money that Ian Gillan was getting. And there was, again, it's a really crazy story to begin with. But again, the whole entire career of Gillan is fucking crazy. And I only remember knowing some of this other information after watching interviews for years, since, getting the set. And it just really blew my mind that Ian Gillan was kind of being a little bit sketchy. He was a little bit sneaky to an extent. Even though he was putting his body and his voice on the line for those years being with Gillan, from at least 1978 to 1982, he was. And the fact that the band members weren't getting equal pay as he was kind of alarming in a way. It was. So it was not a good idea, I think, in Ian Gillan's ideas. And the fact that he would, without telling them that he was breaking the band up so he could also join Black Sabbath, I think another really shitty aspect of that too, that he was just not being truthful with the band members. But these days, it seems like everyone is more forgiving now, and they can look back and have more fond memories. But at that time, they definitely were a little bit disappointed and were kind of just sad that things had to end that way, instead of more on top and being a bit more respectful. So it is what it is, but everyone else has at least a pretty good career, especially Yannick Gers, who obviously has been living in probably his greatest time, I think, in ever. Especially, joining Iron Maiden pretty much gave him such a great chance. This was probably Gillan offered him one of his first big breaks as a guitar player, because he got to play Donington for the first time in 1982, and he got to see a lot of publicity because of being with Ian Gillan, and he probably learned quite a bit of stuff here and there from Ian Gillan that he ended up taking that knowledge to even Iron Maiden. And just to bring up other, again, ties more to like Iron Maiden and Gillan, especially Bruce Dickinson, is because of when Bruce Dickinson was in Samson, for Bruce Dickinson's very first ever full-length album in general, being, of course, Samson's second album, Head On. It was actually recorded at the Kingsway Recorders in London, and that was and since that was being used as the studio for a lot of Gillan's recordings and albums and everything, and he was just recording there, and some guys did some collaborations, especially with Gillan, and so to kind of think that Bruce Dickinson and Ian Gillan were actually sharing the same studio. And of course, was it just a few years ago or something, Ian Gillan actually and Bruce Dickinson was doing something together, if I am correct on that. So, and it's just funny because for years Ian Gillan had thought that Bruce Dickinson had basically stole his identity. But now it's just they're a lot more friendlier, and they can all look back that how everything in their musical career gave them so much in whether it be fame or fortune and so on. And it's just, I think, a really great coming of eras and stuff. It was great. So there it is, folks. There's Magic. There's the swan song to Gillan. If anyone here has any sort of memories or thoughts, whether it be positive or negative, about Gillan in general and the body of work that was left behind, and of course the album right here that I was focusing on, Magic, you can leave them in the comments section below. But if you've never listened to Magic or any of these Gillan albums in general, and you're kind of since you're kind of dipping your toes into Deep Purple and possibly any other of these projects that get linked to Deep Purple, the whole Deep Purple family tree, whether it be like also Whitesnake or Rainbow, and of course this falls into there as well. And as let's say you're dipping your toes into Iron Maiden's family tree, Gillan ends up being in there as well. So if you're just dipping your toes into all of that, if you can find the album collection for a really good price, pick it up. But if you find any of these albums individually, especially like Magic or Glory Road or Mr. Universe or Double Trouble, possibly even like the Future Shock, or in some case you come across a good used copy of the Japanese album from 1978, check it out. They are all worth checking out, these albums. It is such a mesmerizing discography. It's just a great slew of albums. It's just all great. So, with that, I hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.